I was waist deep in my own lake water cool, sun high, mind off everything when I heard the squawk. "Frederick, that's a violation of Section 14B. I turned slowly, pushing the wet hair from my face. There she was, Dolores Cartwright, chairwoman of the Brookhollow Lakes HOA, self-declared guardian of all things miserable. "This lake is on my property, Dolores." I pointed to the dock, the shore, the boathouse, all mine, deeded, surveyed, and paid for. "That doesn't matter," she snapped, marching down the hill in her wedge sandals like she was storming Normandy. "The HOA owns recreational rights to all communal bodies of water. You didn't submit a swimming authorization form." I stared at her, blinking. "A what?" She pulled out a clipboard. "Per our bylaws, page 32, subsection C, unauthorized use of water features incurs a $1,000 fine. You're making that up." "I most certainly am not. The board approved it last month." "It was in the newsletter." "You mean that 20-page propaganda packet you stuff in our mailboxes?" She scribbled something. "You have 30 days to pay or we'll place a lien." I stared at her, stunned. She walked off like she'd just won a lawsuit, heels clicking against my dock. Now, I'm not the kind of guy who looks for fights, but I'm also not the kind of guy who rolls over when someone tries to rob me in broad daylight, especially not in my own backyard. What Dolores didn't know was that, while she was busy trying to run this place like a dictatorship, I'd been quietly managing the only access road into the lake area. She assumed it was HOA property. It wasn't. It was mine. I bought it 4 years ago when the developer sold off unclaimed parcels. Nobody paid attention back then. I walked back toward the house, dripping wet and already sketching out my next move. If Dolores wanted to play games, I'd play back, but I'd play smarter, and I'd play to win. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of bitter black coffee, flipping through the old property plat maps I kept in a fireproof box under the stairs. I found what I was looking for: parcel 17B, the access road that every single resident used to get to the lake. I'd bought it dirt cheap from the original developer when he was liquidating leftover lots, and I'd paid the taxes on it every year since. No easements filed, no right-of-way granted, just a strip of gravel road legally mine. I grabbed my keys and headed down to the county recorder's office. It took about an hour to get the certified copies I needed, but when I walked out with that folder in hand, I already knew how I'd be getting my $1,000 back and then some. By early afternoon, I had a sign company out there with a custom order. Private road. Access by permit only. Contact for fee schedule. I installed it right at the entrance, with a locked drop box bolted to a cedar post. I didn't need to block anyone, not yet. Just let the message sink in. I also dropped a copy of the new permit application form I'd drafted inside the HOA's community bulletin board. It listed a flat fee of $5,000 annually for lake access via the private road, with discounts only for residents not affiliated with the HOA board. Predictably, it took less than a day for Dolores to come stomping up the drive. This time, she wasn't alone. She brought along a suit. Probably their lawyer. "You can't do this," she said, voice sharp enough to slice drywall. The man beside her adjusted his tie. "Mr. Langston, I represent the Brookhollow Lakes Homeowners Association. Your sign constitutes obstruction of communal access. We're prepared to file an injunction." I handed him a copy of the deed. "Be my guest, but unless the HOA's been paying taxes on this land under my name, you're trespassing." He flipped through it, eyes narrowing. Dolores peered over his shoulder, her jaw tightening. "You see that part?" I pointed. "No easement, no public access granted, and I've got the county's certified stamp right there. You've been using my private road for years without a formal agreement. I'm just formalizing it now." Dolores opened her mouth, but I cut her off. "And before either of you start quoting HOA bylaws, let me remind you those don't override property law." The lawyer folded the document carefully. "We'll have to review this with our board." "Take your time," I said, leaning against the post. "But in the meantime, the permit fee stands." And just so we're clear, unauthorized access going forward will be treated as trespassing. I've already spoken with the county sheriff. They left without another word, boots crunching angrily over the gravel. I watched them go, then turned back toward the house, already thinking 2 moves ahead. That evening, I got a call from my neighbor, Tanya, the one who ran the local vet clinic. She'd seen the sign and wanted to know if it applied to everyone. Only to HOA members, I said, flipping the steak on my grill. You're not on the board, right? God, no, she said. Dolores tried to fine me last year for keeping my garden hose in view. I told her to shove it. Then you're good, I'll waive your fee, just fill out the form for record keeping. So you're really doing this? Oh, I'm just getting started, word spread fast. By the weekend, half the neighborhood had called or dropped by to ask about the new permit system. Most of them were on my side, sick of the arbitrary fines, the surveillance drones, and the endless parade of newsletters that read like ultimatums. I waived the fee for anyone who signed a statement disavowing the HOA's recent bylaw revisions. I even printed out a few copies of the property map and highlighted the access road to make things clearer. By Monday, Dolores had called an emergency HOA meeting. I wasn't invited, of course, but Tanya had a habit of recording those meetings for note-taking purposes, and she sent me the audio file. Listening to it while power washing my dock was better than any podcast. They were panicking. Turns out their entire lakefront budget depended on unrestricted access dock maintenance, fishing permits, even the seasonal paddle boat rentals. Without guaranteed road use, they were dead in the water. Literally. One of the board members, Kent, suggested offering me a settlement to rescind the permit fee. Dolores dismissed it immediately. We don't negotiate with extortionists, she hissed. That night, I filed a formal complaint with the county code enforcement office. Not against the HOA, but against Dolores personally. I dug up something interesting in the minutes from the last few board meetings. Turns out, she'd authorized the installation of security cameras pointing at residents' backyards without their consent. That's a violation of state-level privacy laws. I attached screenshots of the footage 2 neighbors had forwarded me and included a detailed timeline. 2 days later, a code enforcement officer showed up at her door. I didn't have to be there, I saw the whole thing from my front window. Clipboard in hand, he spent nearly 45 minutes walking the property line with her, pointing at mounted cameras and jotting notes. By the time he left, she was red-faced and practically vibrating. Then came the kicker. The HOA's lawyer sent me a cease and desist letter, accusing me of interference with community resources. I forwarded it to my own attorney, a guy named Marcus I'd known since college who specialized in real estate litigation. He laughed for a solid 30 seconds after reading it. "They've got nothing," he said. "In fact, this might be a good time to countersue." For what? Unlawful fine collection, abuse of regulatory power. Possibly defamation, depending on what they've been telling people about you. I told him to draft a letter offering to settle. I dropped the permit fee entirely if they formally rescinded my swimming fine and issued a public apology in the next newsletter. They refused, so I filed the lawsuit. It made the local paper within the week. Homeowner sues HOA over lake access dispute. I didn't even have to talk to a journalist. The court documents were public record. But once the article got shared on the town Facebook page, it was like lighting a match in a fireworks factory. Dozens of residents began combing their own fines and violation notices. Tanya organized a community meeting in her backyard, no HOA presence allowed. People brought documents, photos, emails. One guy, a retired accountant named Ron, had a spreadsheet tracking every fine issued in the last 5 years. Patterns emerged targeting certain homeowners, suspicious timing around board elections, inflated fees with no justification. That was when people really started to turn, and Dolores. She wasn't ready for all of it to come crashing down. The morning air had a different feel to it, charged, like just before a thunderstorm. I stood by my bay window, sipping coffee and watching as a black SUV with tinted windows rolled slowly past my house. It was the third time in 2 days. Not a neighbor, not someone lost. No plates I recognized either. That afternoon, Tanya knocked on my door with a file folder in hand and a look that said she hadn't come for small talk. "I just got these from a friend at the county clerk's office," she said, stepping inside. "You need to see this." She laid out a series of documents on the kitchen counter: financial disclosures, land use submissions, and a permit request filed by the HOA 6 months ago. One in particular caught my eye: a special zoning variance application for a community clubhouse and recreation center on land that didn't belong to them. I leaned closer. "Is that my shoreline?" She nodded. "Your plot number is listed as part of the development footprint." They labeled it as pending HOA annexation. The word annexation sent a jolt through my spine. They had filed paperwork suggesting they owned part of my land without informing me, without even attempting to purchase it. "They attached a forged consent letter," Tanya added, flipping to the last page. "Looks like it's supposed to be your signature." It wasn't just a bold move, it was a felony. I made 4 phone calls that night. The first was to Marcus, who told me to scan and send everything immediately. The second was to the county zoning board to request a hearing. The third was to a private forensic document examiner. And the last was to a detective I knew through the local Veterans Association, Detective Clarion, a guy with a nose for corruption and zero tolerance for bureaucratic games. By the following week, Clarion had launched a preliminary investigation. He showed up at my house in plain clothes with a recorder and a folder of his own. "You're not the first person to raise concerns," he said, flipping through notes. "We've had 2 anonymous tips about financial irregularities connected to Brookhollow Lakes. One involved sudden spikes in HOA dues with no explanation. The other mentioned unapproved surveillance devices." I handed him a fresh copy of the zoning application and pointed out the forged signature. "This is fraud," he said flatly. "And if they submitted this to a government office, that bumps it up to a criminal offense." Over the next few days, Clarion interviewed at least a dozen residents. Meanwhile, Marcus filed a motion to subpoena the HOA's internal communications. The court granted it. Within 72 hours, we had access to email threads that read like something out of a low-budget conspiracy thriller. Dolores had been instructing board members to push through bylaws without public notice, suppress dissenting votes, and coordinate with a third-party contractor for the clubhouse build, one who happened to be her nephew. The signatures on multiple land use forms were suspiciously similar, all allegedly from non-board residents. 5 of them were from people who had moved out years ago. That was enough for Clarion. 2 unmarked vehicles rolled into Brookhollow Lakes the next morning, and plainclothes officers entered the HOA's main office, which, ironically, was inside Dolores's guest house. They walked out with 3 laptops, a desktop tower, and 6 boxes of documents. Dolores wasn't home. Word spread that she was at a conference in Tampa. Convenient. In her absence, the rest of the board held a closed-door session to reorganize leadership. But they weren't expecting what came next. The county issued a cease and desist order on all HOA operations pending the investigation. All fines, fees, and permit requirements were suspended. The HOA's bank accounts were frozen, and the zoning board voided the clubhouse application, citing criminal misrepresentation. That evening, Tanya hosted a backyard gathering again. Only this time, it wasn't just neighbors, it was reporters, a city council rep, and even the assistant district attorney for the county. I stood at the edge of the patio, talking with Ron, the retired accountant who'd uncovered the fine patterns. He handed me a printed spreadsheet with new data. "You're not going to believe this. They issued over $80,000 in fines in the last year alone. Most of it went to the same contractor account, the one listed for the clubhouse construction. Money laundering?" I asked. "Looks like it. The ADA took copies of everything." She thanked us, then said something I wouldn't forget. Most HOA cases don't go this far, but this one? This is going to court. The next morning, I woke to find a county-issued notice tacked to Dolores's front door. In bold red letters, it read, "Under investigation, do not remove." Her camera system had been dismantled. The contractor's trailer parked behind her house was towed away. Still, I wasn't taking chances. I installed a second set of motion-triggered cameras around my perimeter and upgraded the locks on the boathouse. Tanya helped organize a neighborhood patrol schedule, not as vigilantes, but as witnesses. Everyone wanted accountability now. Everyone had a story. One couple had been fined for keeping solar lights in their garden bed. Another family was charged $200 for inappropriate mailbox color. A retiree had been threatened with eviction over a flagpole that was supposedly too tall. All of it arbitrary. All of it part of Dolores's campaign to control every inch of the neighborhood. Then a break came. Clarion called me late on a Thursday. We got the forensic report back, the signature on the zoning form, not even close to yours. It was traced over a printed name. He didn't say it, but I could hear the satisfaction in his voice. Forgery charges are coming, and based on the financials, we're adding wire fraud and conspiracy. The court date was set for 3 weeks out, but Dolores didn't wait that long. She returned to Brookhollow on a Sunday evening wearing oversized sunglasses and a scarf, trying to slip back in unnoticed. She didn't make it to her front door. 2 sheriff's deputies intercepted her on the sidewalk. She didn't resist, but she also didn't say a word. Just stared straight ahead as they read her the charges. The neighborhood was dead silent. No one cheered, no one clapped, but every porch light on the street was on, watching. With the HOA leadership suspended and the investigation widening, the county appointed a temporary oversight committee made up of actual residents. Tanya was voted in unanimously. Ron took over finances. I declined an official role but agreed to act as an advisor, especially regarding land use regulations. The permit box at the Lake Road? I left it up for 1 more week, then took it down. Permanently. Access returned to normal but with one change, a posted notice that read, "Lake entrance is private property. Respect the space, enjoy the view." I never cashed a single permit check, the $1,000 swimming fine wiped clean. The HOA was ordered to issue a formal apology not just to me but to every resident fined unlawfully over the past 2 years. Restitution payments followed. Some were small, others were substantial. Dolores. She faced a trial, pleaded guilty to multiple counts. The final sentence included probation, mandatory restitution, and a lifetime ban from serving on any homeowners association in the state. Brookhollow Lakes changed after that. People planted what they wanted. Kids rode bikes without getting stopped. The newsletters became optional. HOA meetings were streamed online and open to all, and me. I went back to swimming in my lake. No clipboard, no fines, no nonsense, just water, sky, and peace earned. A week after Dolores's arrest, the neighborhood felt different not just in atmosphere but in rhythm. Lawn mowers weren't being timed. No one was photographing garbage bins. For the first time in years, people actually waved at each other without watching their backs. But even as the surface calmed, the deeper mess hadn't stopped unraveling. Detective Clarion called me early Monday morning. "I need you to come down to the station," he said. "We recovered something from the HOA office you'll want to see." When I arrived, he led me past rows of desks and into a small evidence room. On the table sat a tower computer, the same one they'd taken from Dolores's home office. Clarion pulled up a folder labeled Maintenance Logs. "Except these aren't logs," he said, scrolling through. "They're surveillance records." He opened a file. It was a series of still images zoomed in shots of backyard gatherings, people barbecuing, kids playing. Each one had a date and timestamp. Some had names attached. I spotted Tanya, Ron, and even my own niece during a weekend visit. "There's no legal reason for these to exist," Clarion said. "They weren't used for code enforcement or security. They were cataloging residents. I clenched my jaw. Why, control, Clarion said. But that's not all. He pulled up another folder marked Compliance Strategy. Inside were email drafts between Dolores and her nephew, the same contractor listed on the clubhouse project. The messages discussed how to inflate violation counts before board elections, target vocal residents, and reroute funds into maintenance reserves that bypassed financial reporting. She used the HOA as a personal ATM, Clarion said. But the worst part. She filed insurance claims for fake storm damage, then split the payouts with her nephew. How much? Over $150,000. My stomach turned. Clarion closed the folder. We're adding insurance fraud to the charges. The DA's office is preparing a broader case now. The next day, I met with Marcus at the county courthouse. He drafted a motion to dissolve the HOA entirely on grounds of systemic abuse, financial malfeasance, and criminal conduct by leadership. It was unprecedented but not impossible. With enough resident support, the county could revoke the charter and transfer community management to a neutral administrator. We needed signatures. 75% of the neighborhood. By Friday, we had 86. The petition was delivered to the county commissioner's office that afternoon, and within 48 hours, a hearing was scheduled. The commissioner's boardroom was packed when the day came, standing room only. Reporters lined the back wall, and a news van idled outside. The walls buzzed with whispered anticipation. When our turn came, Marcus stood before the panel and presented a timeline of abuses. Financial spreadsheets, surveillance photos, forged documents. He ended with a single sentence. This association no longer serves the community, it exploits it. The commissioner leaned forward. And you're asking for full dissolution? Yes, Marcus said. And appointment of a temporary trustee to manage the transition. Clarion testified next, confirming the criminal investigation and pending charges. Residents took turns as well. Each story more absurd than the last: fines for wind chimes, threats over Christmas decorations. One man even cited for having a wheelchair ramp that didn't match the neighborhood aesthetic. The panel deliberated for less than an hour. The HOA charter, the commissioner said, is hereby revoked. Applause erupted, not loud or wild, but stunned, like people had forgotten what hope felt like and were just now remembering. The next month was a whirlwind. A county-appointed trustee named Marla took over administrative duties. She was a retired city planner, sharp, fair, and completely uninterested in power games. She held open office hours at the community center and spent her first week returning improperly collected fees. Meanwhile, Dolores's trial date approached. The DA offered her a deal: plead guilty to fraud, forgery, and illegal surveillance and avoid a lengthy sentence. She took it. Sentencing happened quietly, but the details became public. 5 years probation, 200 hours of community service, and over $200,000 in restitution. Her contractor nephew wasn't so lucky. He got 18 months in county jail for his role in the insurance scam. The restitution fund was divided among affected residents, and for many, it covered years of unjust fines. Tanya used hers to expand her vet clinic. Ron donated a chunk to the local school's art program. I used mine to install solar panels on the boathouse and threw a lakeside block party. No permits, no fines, just food, music, and neighbors finally free to enjoy their own lives. One evening, Marla stopped by my dock carrying a folded lawn chair. "Mind if I join you?" she asked. I gestured to the second chair. "Be my guest." She sat and looked out over the water. The lake was still, moonlight stretching across its surface like a silver ribbon. "You know," she said, "I've worked with communities all over the county. I've never seen one take back control like this." "I think we just got tired of being pushed around," I said. She smiled. "That's what makes it work. Not the rules, not the documents, the people." I nodded, listening to the soft sounds of frogs and crickets. "Will the HOA ever come back?" I asked. Not unless you want it to, she said. And judging by the petition I saw, that's not likely. The weeks rolled on. Fall came, and with it a sense of normalcy. The lake stayed open. The signpost stood empty, no longer needed. People planted what they wanted, painted what they liked, and for the first time in a long time, nobody cared what color your shutters were. I kept the deed to the access road, but changed its designation in the county records from private to communal, with a clause that it could never be claimed by any governing association again. The old HOA newsletter rack. Tanya repurposed it into a free library box. Kids dropped off comic books, mystery novels, and even a few old board games. Every time I passed it, I smiled, because it wasn't just about removing Dolores or dismantling the HOA. It was about reclaiming the neighborhood itself, and we had.